The lights inside the Manhattan broadcast studio were dim just enough to cast dramatic shadows on the faces of the two men across from each other. One was Denzel Washington, the award-winning actor, civil rights speaker, and guest host for the night's special broadcast on American Talks. The other, seated calmly under the intense lights, was Ibrahim Traoré, the controversial yet fiercely admired president of Burkina Faso, a man whose presence had sent shockwaves through every Western institution he refused to bow to. This was supposed to be a symbolic exchange. Denzel was there to challenge. Traoré, to defend. At least that's how the producers had planned it. "You've built a movement on fire and defiance," Denzel said as cameras rolled. "But sometimes, fire consumes what it's meant to protect." Traoré didn't blink. "And sometimes, sir," he said with quiet steel, "fire is the only language colonizers ever listened to." The audience, silent, intrigued, leaned in. Denzel smirked, shifting in his chair. "Let's talk about justice. You claim to speak for the oppressed, but critics say your leadership mirrors the very authoritarianism you denounce." "That's the beauty of Western propaganda," Traoré replied. "You taught the world to fear independence if it doesn't look like yours." Denzel raised a hand. "Let's not turn this into a conspiracy rant." But Traoré leaned forward, voice steady and low. "Then let's talk facts." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document, one that hadn't been cleared by the producers, one that wasn't in the rehearsal script. "You once gave a speech about truth in cinema. About how actors should speak up. But when my people were massacred near a French-owned gold mine last year, where were your words, Denzel? Where was Hollywood?" The studio air turned heavy. Denzel stiffened. "I wasn't aware of." "You were," Traoré cut in. "Because I sent you the footage myself. Weeks before you stood on that stage and called for justice everywhere. But I guess some justice is less cinematic than others." For a moment, Denzel froze. Not from guilt, not yet. But from disbelief. He hadn't expected this. Not the document. Not the footage. Not the quiet fury beneath Traoré's composed exterior. "Are we really doing this live?" he asked, his voice suddenly smaller. Traoré simply nodded. "That's where the truth belongs." The control room erupted in chaos. Producers shouted into headsets. A floor manager stepped forward, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let the drama unfold. But the host's silence, and the audience's unblinking attention, made the choice clear. This was no longer a talk show. This was a reckoning. Traoré calmly placed the folded document on the table between them. "This is a report from the Burkina Faso Truth Commission. 37 dead. All civilians. Their village burned. The perpetrators wore no uniforms, but they left behind evidence. Equipment, tags, even wrappers from ration kits traced back to foreign security contractors." Denzel didn't reach for the paper. His hands were clasped together now, tightly. "You're blaming America?" "I'm blaming silence," Traoré said. "Silence that makes room for death. Silence that gets dressed up in tuxedos and handed Oscars for pretending to care." Gasps swept the studio. It wasn't what Traoré said, it was how he said it. Calm. Unshaken. Like he wasn't trying to humiliate Denzel, but to wake him. And that made it worse. This wasn't a political ambush. This was personal truth, delivered without venom, but with precision. "I watched your films," Traoré continued. "I listened to your speeches. You said the right things. You inspired people like me to speak when it was hard. So why did your voice go missing when it was our children buried?" Denzel finally spoke, but his voice carried less certainty than before. "There's so much going on in the world. I can't speak to every tragedy. But you chose which ones to spotlight," Traoré interrupted. "That's power. That's responsibility. And if you choose to stand for justice only when it's popular or comfortable, then it's not justice, it's branding. Denzel's jaw clenched. Are you accusing me of being a fraud? I'm accusing you of forgetting that silence is a choice, Traoré replied. The audience was still frozen, caught between admiration and disbelief. This wasn't what they'd come for, but they couldn't look away. There was something raw happening on that stage. Not rage. Not humiliation. Just an unflinching man asking, where were you when it mattered? Behind the scenes, the network's executives debated pulling the feed. But one junior producer whispered, if we cut now, we admit he's right. And they kept it rolling. Because for the first time in a long time, live television wasn't scripted. It was real. The lights above them hummed. Denzel Washington sat upright now, posture rigid, face unreadable. But the tightness in his jaw and the distant look in his eyes betrayed something deeper than anger. He was shaken. Not by aggression, Traoré hadn't raised his voice once, but by exposure. This wasn't a man looking for applause. It was a man delivering a mirror. You could have called, Denzel said finally. If you sent me something, I didn't see it. You think I ignored you? I think the world ignores what doesn't flatter it, Traoré answered, his gaze steady. And when it does, even good men fall quiet. The room felt tighter than before. Traoré wasn't backing down, but neither was he attacking. He wasn't here to win points. He was here to say what others wouldn't. He tapped the document again. That report wasn't just sent to you. It was sent to 27 American media figures. Activists. Celebrities. None responded. But you, he paused, you were the one who always said, truth has no filter. So I believed you'd be different. Denzel looked down at the paper for the first time. His fingers didn't move toward it. But something in his face cracked, just a flicker. And if I failed, he asked quietly. Then you admit it, Traoré said. And you try again. That's what leadership is. From the audience, a single clap broke the silence. Then another. Then it stopped, as if no one was sure whether to cheer or reflect. Because this wasn't triumph, it was uncomfortable clarity. Traoré hadn't humiliated Denzel. He'd reminded him of his reach, and his responsibility. The control room remained tense. The show was already a viral storm brewing online. But still, the cameras rolled. No commercial break. No interruption. Just two men and a conversation more honest than anyone expected. You're not my enemy, Denzel said, his voice rough. And I never wanted to be, Traoré replied. But if truth sounds like a threat, then we've forgotten what it's for. Their eyes locked. For the first time, Denzel didn't blink. Traoré leaned back slightly, his fingers laced together. The tension in the room hadn't faded, but it had transformed, moved from confrontation to contemplation. No one was shouting. No one was walking off stage. Instead, the audience was caught in something far rarer than outrage. A reckoning. I came here because my people don't get a stage like this, Traoré said, his voice still calm. And when we do, we're expected to smile, thank everyone, and vanish politely before the next segment. Denzel folded his hands. So this is your moment to flip the script? No, Traoré said, shaking his head. This is a moment to break it. He glanced at the camera, directly into the lens. To the people watching, if this makes you uncomfortable, ask yourself why. If the idea that someone from Burkina Faso could speak this clearly, this directly, unsettles you, then maybe it's not the message that's the problem. Maybe it's the mirror. A silence fell so deep, even the hum of the overhead lights seemed to pause. I don't need applause, he said. I don't need agreement. I just need you to listen. Denzel rubbed his chin, still staring at the paper. And if I choose to stand with you now, what then? Traoré looked at him. Then we stop being actors in someone else's script. The line hit harder than a punch. Some of the audience exhaled sharply, as if they'd been holding their breath since the show started. Denzel finally picked up the document. His fingers were slow, deliberate. "Then let's read it," he said. A murmur spread across the crowd. Not cheers. Not gasps. Just awe. This wasn't a celebrity endorsing a cause. This was a man acknowledging a truth he had once missed. Traoré gave a slight nod. Not of victory, but of respect. Two men. Two worlds. And finally, the same page. Denzel held the document with both hands now. He didn't rush. Each line he read carved a deeper silence into the studio. The crowd watched not a performance, but a transformation. The man they had admired for decades was peeling back layers of comfort to confront something raw. The report says over 14,000 children were displaced in the last 2 years alone, Denzel read aloud, voice tightening. Entire villages uprooted. Foreign contractors extracting minerals while families drink from polluted streams. He paused. His eyes scanned the next paragraph. His voice lowered. Armed groups, some funded indirectly through Western contracts, destabilizing regions that were once peaceful. A beat passed. Then another. Traoré didn't interrupt. He let the silence hang. "This is real?" Denzel asked. "It's not a screenplay," Traoré answered. The camera caught a close-up of Denzel's face, creases deepening, jaw clenched. For the first time, he wasn't reacting as an actor or commentator. He was reacting as a man who had been blind to something he should have seen. "I talk about justice," Denzel said slowly. "I've built my career on roles that fight it. But when it came to this, I was silent." "Silence," Traoré replied, "is louder than denial when it comes from the powerful." That line echoed. A woman in the audience wiped her eyes. A man shook his head slowly, his expression caught between guilt and awakening. "I don't want to be the man who stays comfortable in the role," Denzel said. "Then write a new one," Traoré said. "With your platform, you can." Suddenly, the screen behind them lit up. Producers had activated it remotely. Photos from the report began to scroll, images of children in makeshift camps, miners in torn clothes, fields scorched by fires no one claimed. The studio went dead quiet. But the message was roaring. This wasn't about Traoré attacking Denzel. It was about using the stage Denzel had to bring light to a war nobody dared televise. And now, they were televising it. Together. The images behind them faded to black, but the silence lingered like smoke. Denzel leaned forward, elbows on knees, eyes locked with Traoré. "You know," he said softly, "I thought I was educated. Traveled, informed, connected." Traoré didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply said, "That's the most dangerous kind of blindness, the one that thinks it can already see." The line didn't sting. It humbled. "I didn't know about the cobalt mines," Denzel admitted. "Or that children die so phones can ring in Beverly Hills." "You weren't supposed to," Traoré replied. "The system depends on you not knowing, and worse, not asking." Denzel nodded slowly, as if each word cracked something calcified in his mind. "This isn't about guilt," Traoré continued. "Guilt helps no one. Action does." The crowd wasn't clapping, but they weren't idle. Phones were recording. Eyes were red. Some looked shaken. Others looked ready. "You didn't come here to make me look small," Denzel said. "No," Traoré said. "I came so you'd see how big your silence really was." Denzel let out a breath, sharp and heavy. "You're not my enemy," he said, voice hoarse. Traoré's eyes met his. "I never was." "Then what are you?" Traoré didn't pause. "Your echo." Of what you once stood for. Denzel froze, again. But this time, not from shame. From recognition. You said you wanted truth, Traoré continued. Well, here it is, your voice is still powerful. But if it only speaks when safe, it's a luxury, not a legacy. The studio lights dimmed slightly as the director motioned for commercial. But no one moved. Not even the crew. And in that moment, the roles reversed. Traoré wasn't the guest anymore. He was the message. When the show returned from break, the mood had shifted entirely. Gone was the playful rhythm of late-night television. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was a reckoning. The host barely spoke. He looked at his notes, then quietly pushed them aside. Mr. Traoré, Denzel said, still seated across from him, if this conversation ends here, it'll be just another trending clip. What happens next? Traoré leaned in slightly. Next, he repeated. You either carry this truth with you, or bury it. And if I carry it? Then stop playing the hero on screen while the real world burns behind the credits. It wasn't an insult. It was an invitation. The crowd was holding its collective breath. I'm not here to guilt Americans, Traoré continued. I'm here to remind them. Their freedom was built by struggle. Our struggle today looks different, but it's born from the same desire, to own our land, our voice, our future. And you think Americans care about that? Denzel asked. I think they've forgotten how much they once did. That hit hard. Because it was true. Traoré reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded photo. He held it up. The camera zoomed in. It was a picture of a young African boy, barefoot, standing in a mining pit, holding a piece of cobalt with both hands. His eyes were wide. Not with fear. But with resignation. This boy doesn't need your applause, Traoré said. He needs your outrage. Gasps. Then silence. Then something unexpected. Denzel stood up. So did the audience. No cue cards. No script. Just raw momentum. I want to meet him, Denzel said. You will, Traoré replied. But don't just meet him, stand for him. Speak when it's not convenient. That's how we turn exposure into change. For a few seconds, the show wasn't a show at all. It was America, watching itself. And wondering what it would do next. The credits rolled, but no one left the studio. Even the director didn't yell, "Cut." It was as if the truth had short-circuited the production. The audience remained on their feet, silent, stunned, transfixed not by celebrity, but by clarity. Off-camera, Denzel leaned toward Traoré. You know this will cost me, right? Traoré didn't flinch. Then maybe it's finally worth something. A beat of silence. Then Denzel smiled, not out of pride, but relief. Let it cost. I've been safe too long. The camera crew instinctively kept filming. This wasn't about fame anymore. It was legacy, unfolding in real time. Traoré stepped toward the crowd, holding up the same photo of the cobalt boy. His name is Musa. He's 11. He earns $2 a week. Every time you scroll, he bleeds. People gasped. Phones were raised not to share memes, but to share meaning. I'm not here to ask you to feel bad, Traoré continued. I'm asking you to feel responsible. From the back of the room, someone shouted, "How can we help?" Start where you live, Traoré replied. Challenge your companies. Your politicians. Your silence. Denzel stepped beside him. I'll go with him, he said. To Burkina Faso. I'll meet Musa. And I'll bring that story home. The room erupted, not in cheers, but in a thunderous, unified breath. It wasn't a standing ovation. It was a vow. That night, the clip went viral, not for its drama, but for its honesty. It wasn't titled "Traoré Destroys Denzel." It was titled "Truth on Live TV, When a Leader Woke a Legend." And across America, the question echoed. If Denzel could wake up, what's stopping you? By morning, the world had changed. The clip from the interview had amassed over 60 million views in 10 hours. But this wasn't just a viral moment, it was a viral shift. News outlets tried to spin it. Some called it an emotional ambush. Others accused Traoré of manipulating celebrity guilt. But the audience didn't buy it. The people weren't listening to anchors anymore. They were listening to Musa. His name trended in 48 countries. And not just hashtag Musa, but hashtag who else, a question that tore through corporate boardrooms and political offices. Who else is paying the price for your comfort? At the United Nations, pressure mounted. Burkina Faso's delegate presented documents detailing the abuse in foreign-owned mines. American and European diplomats squirmed. The narrative was no longer controllable. Traoré didn't wait for their discomfort to settle. He flew back home, with Denzel beside him. A camera crew followed, not for a documentary, but to bear witness. They drove hours through red dust and narrow paths until they reached the cobalt fields. There, barefoot and cautious, stood Musa, silent, suspicious. Until Denzel knelt before him. "You don't know me," he said gently. "But the world knows you now." Musa blinked. Then nodded. It was the first time someone had looked him in the eye, not as a resource, but as a reason. That photo, the one Traoré showed on live TV, wasn't just an image anymore. It was a mirror. And the world had been forced to look. When they returned to the capital, Traoré held a press conference. "This is no longer about charity," he said. "It's about equity. We don't need saviors. We need respect. And if that makes you uncomfortable, it should." America listened. So did Europe. Because when truth is televised, and believed, it doesn't go away. It becomes the new baseline. The final press conference wasn't held in a marble hall or five-star hotel. It was in a schoolyard in Ouagadougou. Children sat cross-legged in front of a makeshift podium. Their notebooks were open, not to take notes, but because they wanted to draw what they were about to witness. Behind the mic stood Ibrahim Traoré. Next to him, Denzel Washington. Behind them, no security. No flags. Just sunlight and honesty. Denzel stepped up first. "I came here as a skeptic," he admitted. "But I leave as a student." He glanced at the children. "You don't need Hollywood. You need clean water. Books. Time to be kids." Then he turned to Traoré. "And you," he said, "don't need our pity. You need us to listen, and shut up when it's time to." Laughter rippled through the small crowd. Even Traoré cracked a smile. Then he took the mic. "We never asked to be rescued," he said. "We asked to be heard." The wind picked up as if to carry his words farther. "The West says we need leadership. But what they mean is loyalty. What they fear isn't our failure. It's our freedom." He turned toward the cameras. "You want to talk power? Power isn't control. It's choice. And for the first time in generations, Africa is choosing itself." One of the children raised her hand. "Mr. President," she asked. "Are they still watching?" Traoré smiled. "They're not just watching," he said. "They're listening. And some of them, finally, are learning." He handed the girl his mic. She held it proudly. Behind her, dozens of children raised their hands too. That image became the new icon. Not Traoré. Not Denzel. But a girl in a schoolyard, holding the mic the world once tried to keep from her. The headlines that week didn't just talk about politics or scandal. They talked about recalibration. The rebalancing of a story told too long from only one side. And the message was clear. Traoré didn't hijack the mic. He returned it. Sometimes, truth doesn't arrive with a bang, it arrives in a whisper. A whisper loud enough to shake the foundations of power. Ibrahim Traoré didn't raise his voice, he raised the stakes. And Denzel, once the storyteller, became the student. In a world full of filtered headlines and polished lies, one moment of raw honesty lit up the global stage. Because when the mic lands in the hands of those who were never meant to hold it, that's when the real story begins. Don't forget what you saw today. Because the world didn't just hear a speech. It witnessed a shift. And no amount of silence will undo that.